AITA for exposing my partner's lies and leaving her homeless after she cheated? I've been with my girlfriend for 5 years. We lived together in a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. It wasn't anything fancy, but we made it our own. She works as a nurse at a private clinic, and I'm a freelance developer, so I spend a lot of time at home. That's why I noticed everything, every detail, every little change. And, if I think about it, it all started when she agreed to take extra shifts. Always on Wednesdays, without exception. The first time she mentioned it was casual. She said a coworker was having trouble finding childcare and that she offered to cover the night shift. It seemed fine to me. She's always been generous, always willing to help. But that favor became routine. Wednesdays transformed into forbidden territory. She would leave at 6:45 p.m. with the excuse of a shift starting at 7:30. She always left looking presentable, but not overly so. Neither enough to raise suspicion nor to appear unkempt. It was perfectly calculated. At first, I didn't question it. We lived together, shared expenses, made plans for the future. Why would I distrust her? But something changed in her. She started becoming more distant. It wasn't the kind of dramatic distance you see in movies. It was subtle, silent, like when a song you love stops making you feel anything. But you don't know exactly when that happened. One Wednesday night, I stayed up later than usual. I was working and lost track of time. It was almost 2:30 a.m. when I heard her arrive. I was at my desk with headphones on, but I heard the elevator and her key in the lock. She didn't come into the bedroom. She went straight to the bathroom, showered, something she never did at that hour after a real work shift, and then stayed in the living room for a while. I turned off the light and pretended to sleep. She came in as if nothing had happened, got into bed, and didn't even touch me. I didn't say anything, but from that night on I knew something was rotten, and I started to observe. The following week, the same thing, the same ritual. On Wednesday, she dressed plainly, left without a kiss, and returned late with silent steps and a vacant stare. But that day I noticed something different. She smelled of perfume, one that wasn't hers. She doesn't wear perfume to work, I know that. Her clinic has strict rules because of patients with allergies. That scent wasn't part of her routine, it was part of another life. I started asking questions, nothing too direct. I asked her how her coworker was doing, if she'd sorted out the childcare issue. She simply replied, "Not yet, poor thing." She didn't change the subject, and my blood was boiling, but I swallowed it all. I needed to know more. I checked her Uber account. There were no trips registered on Wednesdays, nothing. I decided to check her call and message history when she went to shower. And that's when something hit me like a kick to the stomach. She had a number saved under a fake name, Laura Nursing, which she talked to almost every day, but especially on Wednesdays. Calls lasting 30, 40 minutes, messages at midnight. She had never mentioned any Laura. Never. I casually asked her about it. "Who's Laura?" I blurted out one night while we were having dinner. She looked at me. It wasn't a look of fright. It was a pause, as if her brain needed to adjust a story. "Oh, she's new. She started recently. I don't think you've heard me mention her." And she continued eating. That night, I checked the number. It was impossible to trace who it belonged to directly, but I found a post in a local group where someone was advertising it as a contact for private transportation services outside of apps. What kind of nurse did that? I started obsessing. I became that person who swears they won't fall into those mind games, but does it anyway. I installed a call recording app. I changed her phone notifications so they would duplicate on my screen without her noticing. Trust was gone. And the following Wednesday was when everything began to fall apart. She left as usual, but this time I followed her. That Wednesday, I couldn't think of anything else. I didn't work. I didn't eat properly. I didn't look at my phone for any message that wasn't from her. I was determined. I couldn't continue living with the doubt, with that tension that gets stuck in your throat and doesn't let you breathe. At 6:30 p.m., she started getting ready. I was on the couch watching TV without really seeing it. She went into the bedroom and came out with that black bag she only used when she went to the hospital. It had that little wear mark on the side that made it easily recognizable, and that's why I knew she didn't use it for anything else. Before leaving, she told me the usual, "Don't wait up, it's a long shift." She smiled at me, but it was that plastic smile, like a supermarket cashier. It had no soul. She closed the door, and I counted to 30 before setting off. My car had a starting problem. One of those things you say you're going to fix but don't. So I opted to borrow a friend's car. I told him I needed to move some things for work. He lent it to me without asking questions. The plan was simple. Follow her, don't confront her, don't yell, just see. No. She went down to the garage and got into a white Corolla, one that wasn't hers. I had already noticed that car once or twice in the building, but never saw it parked in the same spot twice. It seemed strange to me, but, like everything else those days, I let it go. This time I clearly saw her get in, nod to the driver, a guy I didn't recognize, and disappear down the exit ramp. I followed without getting too close. They drove through the city as if they were going anywhere, but it wasn't a hospital, it wasn't a clinic. They went in the opposite direction of all the medical areas of Chicago. They went out on Roosevelt Road and turned towards an area that, to be honest, you wouldn't step foot in by chance during the day, much less at night. They ended up at one of those motels that still have signs with burned-out letters and dangling wires, like a place forgotten by time. It was a place that seemed to exist only for people who didn't want to be seen. She got out first. She was wearing a long sweatshirt, the black bag slung across her shoulder, and her usual hairstyle. Nothing in her demeanor showed hesitation, nervousness, or remorse. It was as if she'd been doing this all her life. They didn't go in together. He stayed in the car for a couple more minutes, checking his phone, I suppose so as not to raise suspicions. Then he got out with that carefree gait and entered the same room where she had already disappeared. Number 16. I'll never forget it. I stayed in the car with my hands shaking. I couldn't move. I couldn't even cry. All I did was stare at that door, as if somehow I could go through it with my mind and see what was happening inside. I stayed for an hour, too. I lost track of time. I began to wonder what I was doing there, what I expected her to come out and say it was all a mistake, to see me and run to hug me with tears in her eyes. None of those things happened. After 11 p.m., they came out. Him first, then her. He lit a cigarette while she got into the car. They didn't kiss, they didn't touch, but there was something in the way they walked, and how they avoided looking at each other too much. Everything indicated that this wasn't the first time. It was a routine, a habit. I followed him back, but not all the way. Halfway there I turned off the car and stopped at a gas station. There was no point in following them anymore. I already knew what I needed to know. It was no longer suspicion, it was certainty. I returned to the apartment long before her. I got into the shower as if the water could wash away the disgust I felt. I looked at myself in the mirror afterward and didn't recognize the face I saw. It wasn't the face of a cheated man, it was the face of a broken guy, dried up inside. She arrived at 2:14. She entered quietly, as always. She didn't even call my name. She went straight to the bathroom. She didn't shower this time, just washed her face and sat on the edge of the bathtub for a while. I saw her through the crack of the half-open door, and for a moment I thought maybe she felt guilty too, but it was too late for that. I didn't say anything that night. I went to sleep, or pretended to sleep, and I promised myself that the following week I would record everything. That whole week was like living inside a movie you didn't want to see. You know every line, every scene that's coming, and yet you can't turn it off. I didn't say anything to her. I didn't say a single word about the motel, about the guy in the Corolla, about how I followed her for hours like a ghost with a shattered heart. What I did was prepare everything, because if I was going to confront her, I couldn't do it with just anger. I needed proof, cold, real, irrefutable. I got a small audio recorder, the kind journalists or obsessive students use. I borrowed it from a colleague, telling him I needed to record meetings with clients who were always changing the project terms. He believed me. I tested it for 2 days straight, hiding it among the couch cushions, under the dining room table, on the bathroom shelf. I wanted to know how loud it was, how much it picked up from a distance. I was surprised. It even picked up when someone spoke softly through a half-open door. The following Wednesday was different, not because she changed the pattern, but because I was ready to follow the script to the end. I made sure to have the recorder in her black bag, camouflaged among her cosmetic bag. I did it while she was showering with a speed I didn't know I had. Everything well hidden, with a new battery and plenty of space. That device could last for 5 or 6 hours straight. Enough. I got rid of any visible emotion. I was kind. I even cooked dinner. She ate little, as always on shift days, but you could tell something wasn't quite right. I don't know if it was her guilt making noise in her head, or if she already suspected something, but she was quieter than usual. I told her I would be working late, that I had important deadlines. She just nodded without asking me anything. She left as always, with the same "don't wait up" and the same door closing without feeling. I waited an hour, then another. I poured myself a whiskey, then another. Not because of nerves, but to contain that feeling of being about to explode from the inside. I checked my phone about 20 times unnecessarily. When the clock struck 2:38 a.m., I knew it was time, that I already had what I needed. She arrived at 2:51, entered the apartment without rushing. She wasn't even trying to feign tiredness. She went straight to the bathroom as if her after-shift routine left her on autopilot. I stayed in the living room acting as if I was watching something on my laptop. I feigned normalcy. She feigned it too. The theater was in full swing. The next morning I left before her. I left her a message saying I had to take care of urgent matters. A lie, of course. I went to my colleague's studio, the one who lent me the recorder, and used his equipment to transfer the audio to the computer. It took me hours. The file was long, but I listened to everything. From the moment she got into the guy's car until she returned to the building. And in between, I heard everything I needed for my soul to die completely. She got into the car talking naturally. No nerves, no tension. "I thought you were going to cancel today," she said to the guy. He replied something like, "You can't get rid of me that easily." Laughter, flirting. She said, "I don't have much time today, so the usual." Okay, that phrase drilled into my head. The usual? What the heck was the usual? They arrived at the motel, said goodbye to the receptionist as if they knew him. The guy said something about the room and being ready. She said, "Thank you. You're a sweetheart." Then, for a few minutes, nothing was heard, of course. The sound of footsteps, a door closing, a mattress creaking, then muffled voices, laughter. The sound of fabric moving, skin against skin. My stomach churned. I didn't listen to it all. I couldn't. There was a part where she let out a low moan, almost contained, and I got up from the desk as if the seat was burning me. I closed the file, turned off the screen, locked myself in the bathroom, and threw up. There it was, all the evidence, everything I needed so she couldn't deny it. And yet, none of it made me feel better. I didn't feel triumphant for being right. I felt like an idiot, like a guy who built a house on sand and only now realized that the ground was always unstable. I spent the next few days without bringing up the subject. I was the best actor in the world. I cooked, did laundry, smiled, all while feeling like I was dying inside a little more each day until Saturday arrived. That day my best friend came over. I told him everything. He's not one to get easily shocked, but that time he stayed silent for almost a minute. Then he told me, "You have to record her again, but this time at home. Make sure it's audible how she talks about him. Make sure it's clear that it's not a mistake. It's the only way that, when you confront her, she won't have a way out." And he was right, so I started preparing the last step. That Saturday night, when she was already asleep, I stayed in the living room with an open notebook and a single thought going around in my head. How much of our life was real and how much was just a costume? Because now every memory with her seemed different, as if everything had been part of a script I didn't know I was acting out. And the worst thing was knowing that I wasn't even writing the last act. My friend was right. I already had the audio from the motel, I had the dates, I had the routes, I had the names, but if I wanted to end this definitively, without any room for her to manipulate the narrative, which she would, I knew. I needed something more raw, to hear her say it. At home, where she always lied to me with the sweetest voice in the world. I spent the whole of Sunday reviewing options. I used an old cell phone I had kept in a drawer for years. I formatted it, installed an automatic recording app that activated when it detected a voice, and hid it in the back of the couch, between the cushions she herself arranged every day. The microphone pointing towards where she always sat. It wasn't an improvised job. I planned it as if I was going to hunt someone who had broken into my life, because, in a way, that's what she had done. I waited. I didn't force anything. I didn't say anything about the subject. I didn't provoke her. Monday passed without incident. Tuesday the same, but Wednesday started to break. That morning, while we were having breakfast, she received a message and instantly tensed up. It wasn't from work. I knew by the way she looked at it. Like when you're hiding something without realizing it. I asked her if everything was okay. She said yes, that it was just some nonsense from the colleagues group chat. I didn't insist, but I took note. At 6:20 she started getting ready. This time she was more nervous. She put on too much makeup. She changed clothes 3 times. Something didn't fit. I approached her, and asked if she wanted me to drive her. She looked at me as if I'd suggested flying to space. "You driving me?" she said with a forced giggle. "No need. I'll manage." I walked away, but my blood was already boiling. She left again without a kiss, without a hug, without any intention of returning to the house as if it were a home. I waited 2 hours, then played the recording on the couch. At first it was silence, then the sound of the door closing, then a voice, his voice. He was in my house. I didn't have to wait long. They spoke softly, but enough. They laughed. She told him he couldn't stay as long as last time, that my work schedule was more flexible now and she didn't want to risk it. He replied with something about missing her lips. She, laughing, said that he couldn't keep saying that or she'd get him into trouble. Him, worth it. She sighed. Pause. Rustling sounds. The guy sits down. She does too. More laughter, more whispers. Then she said something that froze me inside. "I swear I don't feel guilty. It's like he doesn't even exist when I'm with you." That line stuck in my chest like a rusty nail. They kept talking. She was bad-mouthing me, saying she wasn't attracted to me anymore, that it was like living with a roommate, that I didn't touch her like I used to, even though she'd never complained about it before, that she felt that with him. With this guy she'd barely known for months, it was the first time someone had made her feel alive. Feel alive? Cheating on someone for weeks, bringing another man into your partner's bed while pretending to have a normal family life? That was feeling alive. The audio became more intimate, so I stopped it. Not out of respect, but so I wouldn't throw up. Again, I saved everything. I moved the file to my laptop, renamed it, backed it up on a USB drive. Then I went to the bedroom. The bed was still made, my side untouched like a cheap metaphor. I sat there for a long time. I didn't cry or scream. I just thought, how the heck did we get here without me noticing? I didn't talk to her in the following days. I waited until Friday. That day I arrived early. I sat in the kitchen and confronted her. She arrived as if nothing had happened. She was carrying bags, talking on the phone with someone, glanced at me, knew I was acting strange. I told her we needed to talk. As soon as she heard the tone of my voice, she ended the call. She sat down. I already had the laptop open. I asked her if she had anything to tell me. She looked at me confused. She crossed her arms. I asked her again. "Nothing to tell me about your Wednesday nights?" Her expression changed. Confusion gave way to fear, then to anger. "Are you checking my phone? Are you spying on me now?" That was her first attempt at defense, but I didn't need her phone. I showed her the file. I only played the beginning. Her voice, the sound of the door, her laugh, and her phrase, "I don't feel guilty. It's like he doesn't even exist." She froze. She didn't say anything, not a tear, not a word. I shut her down with a single sentence. "You were my home, and now you're not even a clean memory." She got up and went to lock herself in the bedroom. I slept on the couch, as if that could separate the rot from the rest of me. After that night, the silence became permanent, and not a comfortable silence, the kind that happens when two people simply enjoy each other's presence without talking. No, this was the kind of silence that weighs you down, that tightens your chest when you walk through your own house and feel that everything has a new meaning. Even the coffee maker seemed to be watching me with pity. She stopped trying to explain herself. I guess she couldn't. What was she going to say? Sorry? I brought another man into our home because I felt like it? She didn't even look for elaborate excuses. And that was the worst part, because when someone doesn't try to lie to you, it's because they've already buried you in their mind. You're not even someone worth convincing anymore. I didn't yell at her. I didn't break things. I didn't tell her everything I was thinking. I became a ghost inside the apartment, eating out, arriving late, feigning normalcy in front of people who had no idea that my whole life was falling apart. She, meanwhile, behaved as if this were just another couple's fight, as if it would pass, as if we would eventually laugh again in front of a movie in the living room or argue about who left the toothpaste cap off. The following Saturday, I got up before her. I packed a bag with clothes, my laptop, the hard drive with the audio files, and a couple of documents. I didn't make a sound. I left the keys on the table and, before leaving, I stood at the door for a moment. I heard her turn in bed and, for a second, I thought she was going to call me, that she was going to ask me not to leave, but no, nothing. I went straight to my cousin's apartment in Logan Square. I sent him a message to let him know I needed to stay for a few days. He didn't ask anything, greeted me with a handshake, and left me the guest room, without saying a word more than necessary. I sat on the bed and let the rage out, because there I didn't have to pretend. That afternoon, I talked to a lawyer, one recommended to me in a local group. I told him the situation. We weren't married, but we had a joint lease, some things bought together, a joint savings account, and, above all, years of life intertwined as if we were married. He told me that, legally, there wasn't much I could claim if there weren't any major assets, but that the important thing was to protect myself from any debt, cancellations, or future problems. He also talked to me about the emotional side, not as a therapist, but as someone who had seen many go through the same thing. He told me something that stuck with me. Many believe that the end is when you leave, but it's not. The real end is when you stop wondering if you could have done something different. That phrase stayed with me all weekend. On Monday, I returned to the apartment, but only to collect the rest of my things. I entered with my head held high. She was on the couch in the same pajamas she wore on Sundays. No makeup, no trace of the woman I knew. She looked at me, looked down, said nothing. I didn't either. I checked every room, opened drawers, made sure I didn't leave anything that could give her an excuse to contact me again. When I was about to leave, she got up and asked me, "Are you really not going to talk to me anymore?" I replied, "I don't have to talk to someone who erased me as if I were worthless." She looked down again and went to the bedroom. I closed the door. I didn't look back. A few days passed. I started to rebuild myself. I went running. I started eating better. I took refuge in work. But what helped me the most was writing this, putting everything into words. Not for revenge, not for pity, but because I needed to see my story from the outside, to understand how someone can be betrayed like this without having done anything. And, above all, how do you put yourself back together after being broken? One night, I received a message from an unknown number. It was him, the one from the white Corolla. It just said, "It was never about you. Stay out of it." It was between her and me. I deleted it without replying. Not because I was more mature, but because I knew I didn't need validation from anyone who gets into someone else's relationship with dirty shoes. He wasn't the enemy. He was just the knife she chose to use. Later that same night, she sent me a message. I don't know how everything broke down so fast. I ignored her, and that was the first night in months that I slept without waking up with a tight chest. When you decide to break up with someone, especially someone who lived under the same roof as you, the break doesn't feel like a clean cut. It's more like ripping out a fishhook embedded in your flesh. It hurts coming out, it bleeds, and there's always a piece left inside that takes months or years to find. The following weeks became strange. On the outside, it seemed like I was getting my life back on track. I started delivering projects on time again. I forced myself to have normal conversations with people who had no idea what had happened. I even reconnected with friends I had neglected for a long time because I prioritized that relationship. But inside it was a different story. I found myself having strange reactions to small things. A phone alarm, a song she used to sing in the kitchen, the smell of a shampoo brand that still lingered on one of my old t-shirts. Everything was a trigger. I never saw myself as a sensitive guy, but now I understood what real sensitivity was. Not the kind that makes you cry at a movie, but the kind that breaks you inside when you remember that you opened the door of your life to someone who then slept with someone else in your own home. And the problem was that we still lived in the same city. That was the worst part. There isn't enough space in Chicago when you want to avoid someone who was your world. She didn't contact me directly again, but she did through passive channels. I found out through a mutual friend that she was asking about me, that she said she felt lost. Lost. After bringing a stranger into the life we built, she had no right to feel that way. But the real breaking point wasn't her. It was her mother. One afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered without thinking. It was her mom, a woman who always treated me with respect, who even called me the son she never had. And that afternoon, with a broken voice, she apologized to me. "I'm sorry about how everything turned out, son. I'm not calling to justify anything. It's just hard for me to accept that she threw away something so important." I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to be cruel. Not to her. So I just said, "I don't understand it either." She talked to me for a while longer. She told me that her daughter was distraught, that she barely left her room, that the guy she'd gotten involved with only wanted the usual, and that, when he got tired of her, he stopped responding. What a surprise. I thought that my ex was regretful, but that she didn't know how to face it, that she was afraid to contact me again, that she thought I hated her. And I thought, I don't hate her. I've forgotten her. Which is worse, because it's one thing to be hated, it's quite another to be erased from someone's heart as if you never existed. And that's what I was doing with her, without resentment, without shouting, just by making myself absent. I hung up the call, and that night, I did something I had been avoiding. I deleted all the photos. Every single picture of us, of our vacations, of birthdays, of movie Sundays, everything. Even those silly, unfiltered selfies we said we would never delete. It was like cleaning a house after a storm. You realize that nothing is useful when it's soaked with lies. But the story didn't end there. One Saturday night, I went for a walk, alone, without headphones, without a destination. It was one of those quiet nights in the city where the noise sounds distant and your thoughts sound close. I was walking down a side street in Lincoln Park when I saw a parked car, the same white Corolla. My heart jumped. I thought I was imagining things. No, it was him. He was leaning back in the seat with his phone in his hand and an expression I didn't like. I kept walking, but I turned my head one more time and saw him looking towards the entrance of a building, the building where she lived. That's when I understood what was happening. It wasn't just that he had distanced himself from her. It was that there was a part of him that still had her hooked, but at his convenience. It wasn't love, it was control. It was that cheap ego of feeling chosen while destroying someone who gave you everything. And what bothered me wasn't for her sake. It was for the echo of that version of myself that still believed this could be salvaged. That guy was the distorted mirror of everything I hated to be, because he knew she was in a relationship. He knew he was crossing a line, and yet he did it, because he didn't care. And he would do it with the next one, and the next. I went home that night without saying anything, no messages, no calls, but I decided one thing. I would never again carry someone else's guilt. What she did, what he did, wasn't a reflection of my flaws. It was a reflection of their character. Because infidelity isn't an accident. It's a conscious decision to walk all over someone who trusted you. The day I signed my new lease was the first in months that I felt air entering my lungs without weight. It wasn't that it was so hard for me to move physically. I didn't have that much to carry. But, emotionally, leaving that apartment was like dropping a backpack full of stones that I had decided to carry for no reason. I settled into a small studio near Ravenswood. Natural light. White walls. No trace of her scent on the clothes or her things invading the spaces. I slept on the floor the first night with an old blanket and a borrowed pillow. And yet, it was the best rest I'd had since it all began. Starting from scratch isn't inspiring, it's lonely, and it sucks because you didn't choose it. But if you do it right, it becomes one of the few things in life that truly belongs to you. I dedicated the first few weeks to creating new routines. I changed supermarkets. I changed my jogging route. I even unfollowed several friends on social media because I knew they were still in contact with her. I didn't want to know anything more. I didn't need to see hints or crying photos or phrases like, I learned to love myself. That was recycled emotional garbage. And then, one day, unexpectedly, I received an envelope. It was a handwritten letter from her. I recognized it instantly by the handwriting, but I didn't open it right away. I left it on the table, went to shower, ate something, looked at it for another hour, until, finally, I opened it. Not out of curiosity, but because I knew that, after reading it, I could close that chapter forever. It wasn't a long letter. It didn't even seem written from a place of true remorse. She said she didn't know how she had gotten to this point, that she had never planned to hurt me, that she felt swept away by feelings she didn't understand. She talked about how empty she felt with her life, about how I was too stable, and she was looking for something to get her out of her routine, that in her mind, she wasn't destroying anything. She was just looking to feel alive again. It ended with a phrase that made me cringe. I hope someday you can forgive me and remember the beautiful times we had. I didn't finish reading it. I didn't burn it. I didn't tear it up. I just put it back in the envelope and threw it in the trash bag like a used napkin. Because that's what it was now, trash. Not out of spite, but out of dignity. She deserved no more space on my table or in my head. The funny thing was that, after that, I felt neutral. It didn't hurt anymore. It didn't make me angry. It didn't obsess me. It was like background noise that disappears when you get far enough away from the speaker. But the universe, in its perfect irony, wasn't finished yet. A few days later, I received a call from a familiar number. It was her friend, well, her ex-friend, the only one I never disliked, but who, out of loyalty to her, had stayed out of it. This time she was calling, crying. The story she told me was a bombshell. The guy, the one from the white Corolla, had shown up at her work. Drunk. He made a scene at the clinic door. Yelled that she owed him money, that she had promised him things, that she had played with him. She had to call security and then her mother. She was telling me this as if I cared, as if suddenly I had to take care of someone who had stomped on my soul and spat on the relationship we had built as if it were a candy wrapper. I just listened, not out of empathy, but out of anthropological curiosity. When she asked if I could help her, I cut her off with a single sentence. I'm not anyone's ambulance. She fell silent, said, I understand, and hung up. After that, I began to feel something resembling peace. I started listening to music again without it churning my stomach. I went back to watching movies without associating them with moments with her. I even found myself laughing at stupid things on YouTube without feeling guilty for having a good time. And one day, while walking to a bakery I loved as a kid, I ran into someone from the past, an old friend I had lost touch with. We talked for a while, we laughed, we exchanged numbers, and, without looking for it, an invitation came up, going out for a drink on Friday. I accepted, not because I want a new relationship, not because I believe the world is full of soulmates waiting to cross paths with me, but because I understood something. I don't have to fix myself to start over. I can still be me, just without the part she destroyed. That night, for the first time, I didn't think about her. I didn't think about motels or audio recordings or betrayals. I just thought about the taste of coffee, the background music, and how good it felt to talk to someone without wondering if they were going to stab me in the chest as soon as I let my guard down. And that was it. That was the beginning of the end. Friday arrived, and I had no anxiety or expectations or anything resembling that knot in my chest that haunted me every time I saw her getting ready for her night shifts. This time was different. I was going out for myself, not to escape, not to distract myself, just because I felt like breathing fresh air. The bar wasn't anything special, one of those places that survive more on nostalgia than quality. Dim lighting, wooden tables with old glass marks, music low enough so you can hear someone without shouting. We sat in a corner, ordered beers, and the conversation flowed without pressure. We talked about simple things, movies, work, the weather, nothing about relationships, nothing about trauma. And that's where I understood that life goes on, even if you don't want it to. It's not a cliche, it's a raw truth. You don't ask yourself if you're ready. It just keeps moving forward and drags you along with it. And if you don't move, you stagnate. I had been stagnant for months, rewriting every moment with her, analyzing gestures, words, silences, as if looking for a version of the story where everything made sense. But it doesn't exist, because there are people who simply break you and don't even regret it. After the beer, we went for a walk. It was a clear night, one of those rare ones in Chicago where the wind doesn't cut your face. And, without thinking too much about it, I told her a part of what had happened. Not everything, not the details, just enough for her to understand why I had isolated myself from the world for so long. She didn't try to comfort me. She didn't tell me everything was going to be okay. She just nodded and replied with something that struck me. You don't need to understand why someone betrays you. You need to understand why you let that betrayal define you for so long. That broke me. Not because it was harsh, but because it was true. I went home that night and looked at the new apartment as if seeing it for the first time. I opened the window, poured myself a glass of water, and sat on the floor without music, without my phone, without distractions. Just me, without her in my head, without that guy haunting my memories. And there I knew it. I was free. Not because I had planned it, not because I found someone new, not because I got revenge. I was free because I was tired of carrying something that wasn't mine. What she did was her choice. What he did was his lack of principles. And what I did was allow it to take so much from me. After that, I started to rebuild myself for real. I started therapy, not to understand her, but to understand why I put up with it for so long, why I minimized the signs, why I convinced myself that I was crazy when in reality my instinct was screaming the truth from the beginning. And you know what I learned? That there's no redemption in confronting the cheater, there's no relief in exposing them, there's no victory in catching them. All of that is superficial. The real thing is the silence that comes afterward. That space where you ask yourself what you're going to do with yourself now that there's no one lying to you. I never heard from her again. Her number was blocked, her social media deleted, her existence filed away in a corner of my memory that I no longer visit. And if I ever cross paths with her on the street, which could happen, because that's life, I won't feel hate, or resentment, or sadness. I'll feel nothing. And sometimes, nothing is the closest thing to peace you can ask for. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.